we've had an opportunity to go over the per pixel painting options as well as micro vertex, we're ready to move on to the third and final mode that we can work with in 3D Coat, and that is Ptex. Ptex is a technology that Disney developed in-house and used on a number of movies and graciously released it to open source a few years ago. 3D Coat was the very first commercial application that jumped on board with this technology, and it took it a step further. Instead of just exporting Ptex files, which not all renderers support, 3D Coat will actually allow you to either export a Ptex file, or by default it will automatically generate a UV map that can be read by any renderer. So you never have that concern when you're working with Ptex in 3D Coat. Let's go to the Retopo menu. And just as I mentioned previously, if you don't want to have any baking occur in this stage, then you might choose Merge Patch with Ptex. But in this case, let's just choose this first option. And we have our bake skin settings from our last work here. So hit OK. And you can see the dialog now is much different than the other two. But you can see here there still is a need for a one-to-one correspondence between the number of vertices on the model and the number of pixels on your UV map. So just like we did with micro vertex, if you have a 4K map, you multiply that by 4K and you come up with 16 million. I'm not going to be concerned with any other options. Instead of a 2K map, I chose a 4K. But you can actually change that while you're in the paint room if you like. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit OK. Now, I might just disregard all the UVs that we have here because 3D Coat's going to ignore them. And once again, Ptex really just gives you the option to bypass UVs altogether. But the one thing I want to mention while it's calculating is that you give up the ability to work in 2D space because there is no discernible layout here. With this head, I can see where I'm working in the 2D space if I were painting in Photoshop or in a 2D texture editor in the paint room. But Ptex will take every single polygon that I have here and pack it in tightly. And it tries to keep it as efficient as possible so that it uses every single pixel of this UV space. So that's a major plus, but it's also a major trade-off because, again, you can't really discern where you're working on that map. So you're pretty much confined to painting in 3D space. Okay, so let's go to the paint room now and hide our voxel object. And you can see now in our 2D texture editor, turn wireframe off, but you can see with wireframe on, I can see all the polygons from this model tightly packed into the same space here. Okay, so let me turn on wireframe on the model here in the viewport. I'm also going to, let's go to objects. I'm going to hide the tongue, the teeth, and the eyes while I'm working here. And go back to my layer panel. I'm going to create a new layer to paint on. Choose a different brush alpha. Let me try a stamp brush. Or the movable stamp brush. I can use my hotkeys to quickly size it, the bracket keys on the fly, or the 9 and 0 key on the regular keyboard, not the number pad, and so on. And so if, as I'm painting here, if I decide that I need some more resolution in this area, this is just not going to be quite enough, then what I can do is go to the lower part of the tool panel and choose this Ptex icon. Now you'll see in the tool options panel some new options here. This first section is for selections, and this next one is increasing the resolution or decreasing it and so on. This one you can choose the size of the map if you want to increase it while you're working. Okay, and you can also optimize here if you want. You can also force it to fit all the polygons in one UV space if you want inside this 4K map. Otherwise it's going to spill over into other UV maps. Okay, or it's going to create them for you. So with that said, let's go ahead now and choose a brush. I can brush select an area. I'll undo. I'll hit my S key to bring up the symmetry panel. With symmetry turned on, you'll see that it selects in symmetry mode. And I could even use lassos or close splining, one of these selection type tools. I'll just select the entire head area here. And you can modulate your selection. You can invert it if you need. Okay, and invert it again. So I'm going to clear this. I can see that it's selecting these other objects even though they're hidden, so I could lock those. So now let's go ahead and drag select again. Got a few areas that we didn't want. Hold the control key to invert the selection. Okay, so again, you can expand it if you need by clicking here. You can contract it, and you can even select the level of subdivision here. Alright, so let's choose increase resolution. It'll take a few seconds to calculate. You should see a change here. There you go. And it'll try to optimize those as well. Okay, so let me clear the selection now. Go back to my paintbrush and maybe choose a different type of brush alpha here. Oops. And I can use my hotkeys. Just lit it from the mouse and it'll apply it. And as you're dragging it, now click, hold, and drag. It'll allow you to see a preview of it. Okay, so yeah, you can just use this essentially to scale your UV maps on the fly as you're working. And also, if there are other areas that you decide you don't need quite as much resolution, you can do the same thing. Just select that area and choose to reduce the resolution. Okay. So if you want to export to a Ptex file, then you can also choose while you're doing this to flip Ptex quads. I think V-Ray is one of those that oftentimes requires your Ptex quads to be flipped, so you can choose this here before you export out. Okay, so you can choose what to send to Ptex file: color, Ptex, specularity, emissive, displacement to Ptex, vector displacement to Ptex, absolute position to Ptex, and so on. Okay. Now, again, if you don't want to have to do this, saving Ptex files, and you just simply export your model, 3D Coat will generate a UV map that can be utilized by any renderer. So I hope that helps, and we'll see you in the next video.